the Prime Minister was a man, I mean, how he doesn't send himself to sleep, I don't know. Lady Starmer must sleep like a log.
Hello, welcome to Coffee House Shots Year in Review, and today I'm joined by Tim Shipman, the political editor of The Spectator, and Quentin Letts, sketch writer for The Daily Mail. Now, looking back over the past 12 months, gents, what are the things that strike you most as the key political moments of 2025?
Well, I think the start of the year, Keir Starmer had kind of solved some of the problems that he had in the last 3 months of 2024, and the tail of the year has been him gently throwing away that position and being pushed around by the left of the Labour Party. So I think you can see that he did a decent enough job keeping the Americans on side. I'll give him points for that. But after that, it got pretty sticky. The welfare rebellion basically showed the Labour left and a bunch of recalcitrant MPs who, think they're already going to lose their seats and don't really like the idea of party discipline and whipping. That's the sort of thing the right does, whipping. We don't really like whipping very much on the left. So that sort of undermined Starmer's position. It was very clear from quite early on that we needed, that the economy was in big trouble and that taxes needed to rise. And we then spent 6 months of the year speculating about what that might be, with quite a lot of help from the Treasury, it has to be said, who were quite keen for everybody to write that they were going to put up income tax. And you only have to look at the figures in recent weeks to see that that has done no end of harm to growth and to the general state of the public finances. And like all Labour governments, employment has started to rise. Inflation is still unemployment has started to rise, as it normally does under Labour governments. And we still haven't had the workers' rights bill. So the main story of Labour is one of sort of pretty solid decay. Whether it's terminal, we'll be able to tell people in future years. And then on the other side of things, Kemi Badenoch started very badly, and then towards the end of the year got much better. Her personal ratings have gone up. But probably the other key player in the latter quarter of the year was the arrival of Zach Polanski as the leader of the Green Party, full of lots of energy, talking quite a lot of strange things very loudly in it, but in a way that young folk like. And the Greens are now stealing votes to the left, just as Reform are stealing votes to the right. But obviously the year belongs on the whole to Nigel Farage and Reform, particularly over the summer. The main parties seem to, I don't know what they were doing over the summer.
It's like they sort of cricket, didn't they? Sort of packed up, went for tea for 6 weeks.
But you imagine when they go off and do that they're going to do a lot of thinking and come up with these brilliant conference speeches. And actually, Starmer's conference speech was okay and Badenoch's was quite good, but it hasn't really changed the weather. And there's now a lot of articles around about whether Reform have peaked or not. I even wrote one of them myself. I concluded probably not.
There's a long way to go, though, isn't there? And
There's
a heck of a long way to go. But the moment of the year, beyond doubt, was Rachel Reeves's tears in the House of Commons, for talking as a sketch writer, and I think any cartoonist would agree. I mean, there was just a gripping image of the Chancellor and prime-time politics, parliamentary politics, blubbing. And that said it all, really, about the state of the economy. The other big moment in the chamber was that debate on the welfare, attempt to cut a sliver off the welfare budget. And there was a moment when Ian Lavery, who's a Labour left-winger, stood up and was pretty much saying, what on earth is going on here? Because there were whips going around telling people that the government was going to collapse. And Lavery just couldn't believe that the left had pulled off this victory over Starmer, even though he had an enormous parliamentary majority. So those two moments, actually, of course, they're quite related in that the economy is doing badly because people can see that the government has no intention of reducing spending. And those both happened in the House of Commons. It's been quite interesting to be in the gallery.
I think the third one I would offer, actually, is the other big issue of the year has been migration. And while the government has been unable to cut welfare, has had to raise taxes, they are trying to make a sort of crackdown on asylum seekers and pushing through the idea that if you're a refugee, if your country becomes safe, you return to it. The Labour left hates this, but even Labour voters think that this plan being pushed by Shabana Mahmood is a good idea. But lots of leaders on the left have not got that message yet, and the Lib Dems stood up and lectured her. and she said,
Max Wilkinson stood up.
Max Wilkinson of the Lib Dems from Cheltenham. The only foreign invasion that Cheltenham gets is when Quentin and I go and watch the racing every March. Talk about out of touch, saying, that the Home Secretary is using this inflamed language and is stirring things up. And she pointed out that things are pretty stirred up, actually, and I'm the one who gets called an effing packy in the street.
Yeah, that was a very good moment.
Not you, son. And I think that crystallised the sort of bit where politicians who get it and the public are on one side of this issue, and quite a lot of people in the House of Commons, including 80% of the left of the Labour Party, don't get it either, and that certainly extends to the Lib Dems, and it extends to the Green leadership as well. I mean, Zach Polanski was saying stuff about this the other day, but if you look at the polls, half of Green voters like this stuff, 57% of Lib Dem voters and 70% of Labour voters. So the public are with La Mahmood. Max Wilkinson looked a bit surprised after that, didn't he? And he went very pink and then apologised the next day, I think, or he grovelled a bit to Mahmood. That's the value of being in the chamber. You can actually see the thing actually smack him in the face. So that happens. It's very satisfying.
Well, I'm glad you had 3 good moments. That's great.
3 more than some years.
Exactly.
I mean, Quentin, what's the mood like being in Parliament? There are very few journalists who are in the Commons chamber more than you. And has there been that sense of, authority begets a dying king, that sense of power draining away from this government across the last 12 months or so?
Well, it has to be said, Hansard are in there more than me. Poor blighters. There was a moment.
Not volunteers.
There was a moment.
I think you might get more per word.
I looked, Prime Minister's questions, middle of December. The Prime Minister was talking, and I looked, there was a row of 12 Labour MPs, all women except for one, who had one row down from the back. And they all looked uniformly bored, depressed, unimpressed, and just sort of fed up with their Prime Minister. And so I think there is a real sullen disobedience simmering towards Starmer, which will cause him problems. Another big moment, really, of the year for me was during the Labour Party conference when I think he got a rather bad slot. Was it the last day? Ed Miliband made a speech.
Oh, yes.
And Ed Mill, for all his defects, which are considerable, is a very good performer. And he is an old-fashioned sort of performer at that, because he throws his arms around and he varies his voice and he makes jokes and then goes very whispery and emotive. And the Labour activists loved him. And so that makes you wonder as whether or not Ed Mill could finally grab the premiership, albeit without an election, by becoming Starmer's successor.
And I think what most people in Whitehall say is that whatever you think of what he's doing, he does know what he wants to do, and he knows how to make his department do it. And there aren't always that many ministers that are very good at that.
But the trouble is, of course, that the reasons behind the thinking behind it is so dodgy.
Well, no,
that
I mean,
it might the electoral thinking.
Certainly
anyway.
wasn't advocating it.
No, I know you weren't. But I mean, that it might be the thing that has to fall into the sea this year. Is
It
that
may
policy.
be, but equally, it's the sort of thing that the left loves, and they have. They've forgotten about the bacon sarnie, haven't they, and cleaved him to their bosoms.
And they've forgotten about the electorate as well.
Yes. And I think Ed Miliband, actually, to his credit, has not forgotten about the electorate. I don't think he wants to go on that parade again, to be honest.
Well, you think he doesn't want to become a leader?
I don't think he does. No.
And that leads nicely on, because I've been suggested by our broadcast colleagues here a few kind of awards, honorary awards. Obviously, we had the Spectator Awards 2 months ago, benefit of 2 months extra, etc. Just a few things, but one of which, of course, is a question to both of you gents, is who's up and who's down from this year? Whose stock has risen and whose has plummeted?
Well, Kemi Badenoch's is clearly up. I mean, I'm not sure if Starmer's is down much, to be honest. I mean, I think it was pretty low to start with. There's just nothing exceptional about Starmer apart from his blandness. Badenoch has shown a bit of fight. I think the other one who sort of, again, a great moment of sort of drama, which was supposed to do one thing and achieve the other, was Andy Burnham's interview with the New Statesman, our esteemed rivals, the week of the Labour Party conference. Let's put it this way. We stuck Shabana Mahmood on our cover and said, here's the coming woman. And they stuck Andy Burnham on theirs. And ours lasted rather more time than theirs did, because in that very interview, Burnham said, well, I don't think, why should we be in hock to these bond markets? As he was laying out his stall to be, the leader of the party and of the country. And it's very clear from the last couple of days that he hasn't given up and he's muttering about getting a seat. But, he stuck himself out there. He didn't have a seat to go to. He didn't have 80 named MPs ready to support him. And the bond markets made pretty clear what they thought of him. I mean, this is why Reeves's tears are this sort of signal moment, because the bond markets went bananas, because they thought almost anything is going to be worse than Rachel Reeves. And certainly Andy Burnham saying, why on earth do we need to listen to these people? Well, because you're borrowing quite so much money, Andy. And by the way, you've just outlined in the same interview that you want to borrow another 40 billion on top of what we're already borrowing. That's why we need to listen to the bond markets. And if that hasn't disqualified him as Labour leader, then the Labour MPs are more out of touch than we thought.
Little Wes has had quite a good year in that he is still in the running as a potential successor to the Prime Minister. And he has not had it all his way, but his department seems to be relatively better run than others. And he has stopped sitting on the front bench at Prime Minister's questions. What he does, he sits down by underneath the Speaker. He sits on there's a little step just to the right of the Speaker's chair, where his colleagues can see that he's there, so he's not being disloyal. But he doesn't have to be filmed nodding along to what Starmer is saying.
You can also see a lot from there, can't you? You can see those faces that you were talking about, the ones that look like
That's a very good point. Very good point. You
can see who's annoyed and who's angry and who's disappointed.
I hadn't thought of that.
And actually, you're facing a
A
colleague.
certain Michael Gove used to stand behind the Speaker's chair, which gave him a very good view of things as well, I believe.
So we're treating
know what
some
happened
of
to
the
him.
naughty step in Parliament. Who else, Quentin?
Well, who else has done well? Funnily enough, I think Angela Rayner has done reasonably well in that she seems to have overcome a pretty bad scandal. Not paying tax that you're meant to pay strikes me as a bit of a killer blow for somebody who wants to become Prime Minister.
And being absent throughout the worst part of the year for Labour.
She seems to have sailed through it and reckons that she's back in with a chance. She made a not particularly memorable return speech to the Commons. A few of her lackeys ran, but you can't say that it really gripped the Commons. And I don't think she's really got the oratorical equipment to be Prime Minister, mind you, nor is the man in the job at the moment. But, she's still being spoken of, and therefore she may have had a reasonably good year. Some people have had bad years. There's a poor little man from Scotland who got sacked, whose name I can't even remember now, Murray.
Murray. He got demoted.
He got demoted and then got given a grotty job under that. And he is very cross, and apparently his wife is even crosser that he got sacked. And he's lamenting that it's not fair, Gov. Well, that's the thing about politics.
Pay cut, of course, when you drop out of the cabinet.
But this is the reason I alight on this very minor figure, Mr. Murray, is that he's complaining it's not fair. Well, politics isn't fair. And so, for instance, Johnny Reynolds, who was doing quite a good job in the Trade Department, I thought he was one of the better people on the front bench, he got given the Chief Whip's job, in which he's doing very badly. And then the former Chief Whip, who's a bit of a grunter, Sir Alan Campbell, has now been made leader of the House, and he's actually ticking along quite nicely in that he seems to be a great improvement on Lucy Powell. There's another who's had quite a good year, allegedly. I'm not convinced.
Very helpful sacking, wasn't it, essentially?
Yeah, she was
got
dumped
the
as
boot
leader of the House.
Well, she's the only cabinet minister who departed government entirely, right, in that reshuffle. And then she was back, 6 weeks later or thereabouts?
Deputy leader, yeah.
Yeah, but there were a lot of them sort of oscillating. And it's hard to say at any one particular moment whether they're up or down. But at least they are still in the game. And that, in politics, is what matters.
Let's talk about one of the Reeves' favourites, David Lammy. Down, not out, maybe?
Down. Very much down. There he was. Even though he has now been made Deputy Prime Minister, a title to which he is apparently greatly attached and demands that it be used at every occasion. Anyway, he's been dumped from Foreign Secretary, which is a lovely job. You get chevening at the weekends, and you get all sorts of glorious free
Carlton Gardens.
You get the use of your own jet to go abroad. And he's now Justice Secretary, in which he gets to wear a stupid wig and also has to deal with the horrendous problems in the courts, and has now come out saying he's going to reduce jury trials, and he doesn't have the intellectual equipment to argue this case. So he's poor old Lammy.
Do you think he wears the wig on the private jet? That's the question. That's what I'd like to know.
But I'm quite fond of Lammy, and I think he does have a certain sort of aura. He's got a personality at least.
And that's actually why he did quite well with the Americans. They like this sort of big figure. He's quite
Bonhomie.
tall. He comes in. He's sort of full of bonhomie and all of that.
And
that
he
actually
used
worked
he
quite
used
well
to
with Trump.
have he used to have a sense of humour about himself, but now that he's become deputy prime minister, seems to have gone to his head a bit.
Very serious job.
Best,
I remember when he got the job, friends of his got in touch to explain how this was a very serious job and it was very important, and he was going to be deputising for Keir in a whole range of ways which have not yet happened, and that he would be still the keeper of the relationship with J.D. Vance.
This leads on to one question I was going to have, which was a best PMQ session. And of course, there was only one occasion where he's filled in for the Prime Minister, deputising DPMQs, which was the infamous one against one of the lesser-known heroes of the Tory frontbench, James Cartledge, which was quite a session, wasn't it?
Well, Cartledge slightly mucked it up by forgetting how many questions he was meant to be asking and miscounted. But afterwards, when the fourth umpire looked at it, they discovered that Lammy had been not entirely accurate in his answers. And it was all to do with how many prisoners on the run there were. Yeah. And of course, this is the other thing, where people in striped uniforms keep on being legging it away from Wormwood Scrubs at the moment. And this is another of Mr. Lammy's problems, and he's become so sensitive about the matter. He will not even answer questions about it in the Commons. He gets one of his underlings to do it instead.
I think it was the worst broadcast outing for Mr. Lammy since Celebrity Mastermind.
I've got one or two more. So, best defection of the year.
Defection?
Defection.
Oh, Danny Kruger. That was a considerable blow to the Conservatives, I think. And at last, there's somebody in the Reform Party who might be able to formulate some policies and do some thinking. Whether or not he can do it all on his own, I don't know. I'd have thought they needed a few more brains there. But nobody really saw that coming. No. And it did say something at the time about Kemi Badenoch's prospects. But since then, she's lifted a bit. And therefore, Kruger might be thinking, oh, maybe I went too soon. It's a bit like, cricket. You don't want to leave the crease until you're sure you can get to the other side. And maybe he has made a mistake. It's not yet clear.
And there's a bit of an adage in politics, which is that you send for the second best brains. The really clever people aren't always terribly good at politics. For me, the perhaps maybe not as damaging or as important, but the most emblematic was Andrea Jenkins joining the Reform Party and, of course, taking to the stage at their conference.
What was there?
And in a sequined dress, singing, "I'm an insomniac," a song she had written herself and wished to perform at Eurovision. And I trust that if Reform achieve preferment from the great British public, that we will let her go and do that very thing.
I was there that day, and actually, as I was watching it, I had to question myself. I thought, my God, how many drinks did I have last night? And I thought I was completely
It is the single
hallucinating.
strangest thing I've ever seen at a conference, but somehow totally captured the sort of camp weirdness of Reform at the time.
Which is no bad thing,
No,
actually.
of course
the
not.
Reform conference was a belter.
It was easily the most fun.
And the best thing about it was Jeremy Kyle going around asking questions from the audience. It really made a political conference feel very different. Just going back for a moment to Kruger, the reason that really has value for the Reform is that Kruger is the sort of young man that you could, a girl might take to her parents and realise that he was going to be polite and he'd be clean behind the ears and wear a tie and all that. He brought the drawing room to Reform, and that matters in places like Hampshire and Surrey. He's house trained.
Yeah, he doesn't wear a sequined waistcoat.
Yes, I'm not sure you can say that about all the Reform gents necessarily. Quentin, also, there's a lot of commentary at the start of this Parliament about most secular ever, etc. But you've written a great piece for us in the Christmas mag talking about it's the drippiest Parliament of all time. Explain what you mean and who is your drip of the year?
Well, you get a lot of these apostrophe laws, don't you? There are a lot of them flying around at the moment where laws are named after victims, and there's been quite a lot of victims' mums being pointed to in the gallery and being mentioned. That used to be a rule in the Commons. You didn't mention who was in the gallery. It was a very good rule. It keeps on being broken. The Speaker keeps on mentioning. Today we've got the Speaker of the Ruritanian Parliament, and the Speaker of the Ruritanian Parliament then stands up to accept the non-existent applause. But we keep on getting these references to victims in the gallery. Well, you've got a lot of that. But you've also got a lot of Labour MPs who are desperately trying to mention, and Lib Dems, all the Lib Dems are moist as a ginger cake. They keep on mentioning their constituencies, thinking, because if I'm going to be a good constituency MP, I'll be voted back in. I hate to tell them that this just doesn't happen. Used to be a very assiduous Conservative backbench MP called Philip Holliburn, who was always mentioning Kettering.
Kettering, yes.
Lost his seat. Kettering couldn't care less about him.
I see
Anyway, but there's a little man.
South East London these days. So
There's
he's
a
nowhere near
man.
Kettering now.
There's a man on the Lib Dem bench. It's called Josh Babarindi,
The new president of the
from
Lib Dems.
Eastbourne,
Yes.
who is the new Private Godfrey. Do you remember Godfrey in Dad's Army, who's had a sister called Dolly? And really, Babarindi tells us all about where he learnt to swim and which bus he used to go on when he was little. It's just pathetic. So whenever he stands up, I want to snap my pencil.
I hope his bladder's more robust than Private Godfrey's.
But they are. It is a parliament that at the moment doesn't seem to be alive to the roughness of life and the fact that life has its setbacks. And when there's a tragedy, they all start emoting. It's frightful, sort of squirting of tears everywhere, like a leaky hose.
I mean, you've been covered about 7 parliaments or so, Tim. And how does this rank? Is it sort of the wettest, the drippiest, overrepresented by saps, as it were?
I think this is the bunch of MPs who least like being MPs that I've ever come across. There was a bit of criticism of the sort of Tories who got elected in 2019 that, you know, some of them popped out for a cup of sugar and found themselves an MP, and that's certainly been the case with a lot of these Labour people. And they, you know, the whole idea of sort of whipping is so antediluvian to them. The idea that you might be told what to think or what to do, you know, in the interests of sort of party unity and functioning government. And they're all sort of in it for themselves. They're already looking over their shoulder, and as Quentin says, you know, desperate to sort of prove themselves to the locality on the grounds that, you know, if I mention my seat enough and I make some nauseating point about the local housing scheme or whatever, that somehow will be re-elected against a sort of tidal wave of reform voters in those seats. And they don't seem to understand that. I mean, a really assiduous constituency MP who works it hard for 30 years might get a personal vote of about 2,000, and even they are swept away quite regularly. It's very unusual to buck the trend.
Going back to my Ian Murray point,
Yeah.
you know, politics is rough. You've
It's
got
a
to
rough
make
old
tough, rough decisions sometimes, and you've got to say no to pressure groups. And when somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, there's no number 11 bus to my cemetery on a Sunday in Leeds," which one complete drip on the Labour benches said, you've got to say, "Well, bad luck. Get a bloody Uber." You know, I mean, you know, why does everyone else have to pay for your trip to the cemetery?
But the great thing about having a bunch of drips is a whole bunch of them will get kicked out at the next election, and then another whole bunch of people desperate to...
Sometimes the wrong ones get kicked out, though.
Well, that's true.
You know, the Tories, I mean, there's some terrible man from Leicestershire called Costa, who's still an MP.
Costa, yeah. He was on the liaison committee the other day.
Oh,
I mean, how does that rank as well? I mean, that sort of rounds off the parliamentary term, doesn't it, every year, the liaison committee? Quentin, what were your thoughts on watching that? I think you wrote something like an absolute bore fest or something like that.
It was just grotesque. The Prime Minister was a man... I mean, how he doesn't send himself to sleep, I don't know. Lady Starmer must sleep like a log in the middle of supper. But there was only one moment, really, when a Lib Dem, Alistair Carmichael, had a go at him about the farms tax. But the rest of it was just procedural sort of blether. People like this man Costa I mentioned, the Tory drip from Leicestershire, he was moaning about subsection paragraphs in the Code of Conduct. There you have in front of you for 90 minutes the Prime Minister at a time of war, at a time of economic decline, at a time of vast social upheaval. And this man Costa was asking about the Code of Conduct for ministers. I mean, it just defied belief.
I mean, Quentin, it was a previous, episode on Coffee House Shots where you came on and we discussed about your criticism of the Mandarin class. I think one senior civil servant's mother wrote to you to complain about something you wrote.
That's right,
I
yes.
just wondered if you'd had any sort of fan mail or abuse from people you've written about this year.
No, nothing like that. I can't even remember her name now, but she was jolly. She wrote me an absolute stinker. Then I wrote one back to her, and then she became my friend.
Really?
Yeah.
Charm offensive.
Housewives' favourite.
He was head of the civil service, that man, I think. The number 2 head. I can't remember his name now. No, they avoid me on the whole. Some of them apparently have a go at me on Twitter, but they don't realise that I can't read Twitter. I don't know how to read Twitter, so I don't bother reading Twitter. So I have to post on it every day, but that's, you know, Twitter is not to read, it's just to be read on.
Sage advice as we end 2025. And just as a final question, gents, both of you, I thought, any predictions for the year ahead? Things to watch, moments you'll be looking forward to as we approach 2026, next 12 months or so?
I will be looking forward to the 3 or 4 hours sleep I will get on the evening of May the 6th, 7th, and waking up to find out what the result is, because I think that is going to shape the next 3 years of British politics. And we could have 1, 2 leadership contests afterwards. Reform could be rampaging towards a majority, or could have had a disappointing night. And we could, well, as Paul Goodman was saying the other day, we could see a massive surge in sectarian voting, which I think will also have quite a big impact on British politics. So to me, it's all about that morning after the local elections, because I think that shapes the rest of our lives, really.
I have two suspicions, really, not predictions. One, I don't know how much Farage is really enjoying life at the moment. I just get the impression he is finding it all a lot less fun than he was expecting. So that's just something to watch there. And the second thing is Ukraine. And there may well be an end to the war in Ukraine, and that might help the government. So although we all think at the moment the economy is shot, and that Starmer is useless, and that Reeves needs to be taken off to a psychiatric home, the end of war in Ukraine actually might help them and might help us as a country.
War is over. Very Christmas tune to end on. Thank you, Quentin. Thank you, Tim. And thank you for watching Coffee House Shots.